What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining me as always. Welcome back for the end of week 1 of the Camp Crystal Lake tour. Today we're going to be taking a look at Jason. Can you let me intro you in here? Anyway, today we're going to be taking a look at... Give me a second, guys. There we go. Anyway, let's get into Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Now, before I get into my review here, I just have to make a quick mention that we have officially crossed the halfway point of the Friday the 13th franchise. And while the first 6 movies are a pretty steady incline in quality, minus maybe a few road bumps with Part 3 and 5, the back half, unfortunately, has quite a few dumpster fires in it. In one way, it's a little bit more fun to review bad movies, just because there's so much to critique about them. But in another sense, it does make me a little sad because most of my favorite movies I've already reviewed, so now we're just getting into the downhill portion. Speaking of, releasing in 1988, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, takes place 7 years after the events of Jason Lives. So this pretty much means that in a 13-year span, Jason was only awake for 24 hours. You had Tommy Jarvis as a child that put him into the grave for 6 years, and then Tommy Jarvis again put him at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake for another 7 years. So Jason was largely out of commission for 13 years of prime killing opportunities. Tell me who the real bad guy in this series is. Now, Part 7 introduces us to final girl Tina, or Carrie Light. Get it? Because Carrie White and Tina's like a generic... You get it. So we're introduced to Part 7's final girl Tina, but not before, you guessed it, another recap. Now, if you're keeping score at home, this is now the 3rd recap sequence in 7 movies. Like, at this point, I feel like I'm starting to watch Seinfeld. I'm out. Now, luckily, the franchise learned their lesson after this one, and we don't really get any more recap sequences other than the maybe short abridged one that we get at the beginning of the 2009 remake, which in that case totally makes sense. But anyways, we're introduced to 10-year-old final girl Tina in this movie when she discovers she has telekinetic powers and accidentally kills her abusive father, who, by the way, totally deserved it. Fast forward 7 years, and we now have our 17-year-old final girl Tina in her final evolution, headed back to Camp Crystal Lake to see a therapist. After a quick few setup scenes, learning that the therapist is a complete tool, and meeting some of the worst and most forgettable supporting characters in this entire franchise, Tina runs to the lake trying to revive her dad, but instead, she revives Jason fucking Voorhees. And this version of Jason looks awesome. This is one of the very few things that this entry nailed. He's still rocking the chain around his neck, thanks to Tommy from the end of Part 6. I mean, he literally has his spine exposed, so you can see the bone. His body just looks like it's kind of deteriorating from being in the bottom of a lake for 7 years. And of course, you can't talk about Part 7 without mentioning the introduction of Kane Hodder. Now, this man is widely regarded as the definitive Jason of the series. While no other actor portrayed Jason more than once, Kane Hodder reprised the role for 4 movies. And he definitely adds a new dimension to the character. I love how Kane Hodder's version of Jason always seems so pissed off. Just his physicality and the way he's always like, just like breathing heavy. I love the anger he brings to the character. And I'll be honest, after being either in a grave or under a lake for 13 years, this is how I would expect Jason to be at this point. So I totally buy into the new Jason, and I love Kane Hodder's performance. Now, is he my favorite Jason? That I'm not so sure of. but I do love his portrayal. And unfortunately for Kane Hodder, as you'll see based on my reviews, we get one of the best Jason actors, and he's in a few of the worst movies of the franchise. Obviously this isn't his fault, but it does kind of hurt some people's rankings of him, because a lot of his movies are hard to sit through. But honestly, I could talk about Kane Hodder for another 30 minutes, so let's get back to the plot of the movie. So yeah, Tina accidentally revives Jason instead of her father, and to be honest, at this point, I'm not sure exactly how she lives, because once she sees Jason, she just like passes out on the pier. And hey, maybe Jason gave her a one-time pass as a thank you for reviving him. And after a few lame deaths, and Tina's premonition of one of the guys at the birthday party getting stabbed through, we get one of the most iconic moments in the entire franchise. You all know what I'm talking about. That sleeping bag kill, baby. At this point, we get a mandatory skinny dipping scene, as it seems they've learned their lesson from Part 6 with the no nudity, where Jason gets a chance to add a few more teenagers to his body count. And we then transition to one of the main plot points here, where Tina's mom discovers that the therapist is trying to like exasperate Tina's condition just so he can study her telekinesis and I guess use it for his profit. And then after Tina overhears this conversation between the therapist and her mother, she steals the car to drive away and sees this image of her mother dying in front of her on the road, which is done pretty well, and immediately crashes the car. After this scene, we get a few more bodies being added to the body count. We have like the Thelma character who can't see without her glasses, but she's trying to impress some guy. And just a side note, the reason I'm glossing over the kills in this movie so much is because the kills in this movie suck ass. This has to be the worst collection of kills in the entire franchise. As I mentioned previously, parts 5 through 7 all had like this huge MPAA censorship, and it definitely shows up the most here in part 7. Aside from the sleeping bag kill, I really don't think there's anything to mention here. We even get an attempted recreation of a classic kill from part 4 where Jason throws the girl out of the window onto the car, which her name was Tina, by the way. Small world. But they tried again in this movie, and it falls flat on its face. See what I did there? Yeah, but it's just so lame. Like, you can tell when the girl falls on the ground, like, it's literally just the actress, like, jumping off camera into the camera shot. It doesn't even look like she fell from a high distance. Like, I'm pretty sure that girl's still alive, Jason. You might want to go check on her. And then following Jason's only use of a power tool in the series, on the therapist. And giving that bitch Melissa exactly what she deserved, with that axe to the head. We get the part of this movie that actually kicks ass. This is of course Tina versus Jason, and this final act definitely works for me. It's a shame the rest of the movie couldn't match this energy, because man, this final act is so good. Tina absolutely destroys Jason here. I think Mr. Voorhees has finally met his match, and having a stuntman like Kane Hodder play Jason pays off here in part 7 more than any other entry. Man, he gets a light smashed over his head, he falls through a staircase, and he even set what was at the time the world record of a 44-second on-screen controlled burn. Kane Hodder really did that, and he still has the scars today to prove it. And during this sequence, we even get our first unmasking of zombie Jason, and it is badass. Like, this was such a cool look for the character. But don't worry guys, part 8 will completely shit all over that. Unfortunately, They didn't end this movie with that awesome final act that at least could have redeemed this movie a little bit. They had to add one more scene in there just to leave a bad taste in our mouth. When we finally get outside the cabin and Jason chases Tina and Nick to the pier, and we get this terrible scene where Tina summons her undead father and he like comes up and wraps his chain around Jason's neck, dragging him back down under the lake. I just absolutely hated this ending. Like, at the very least, they could have put some cool zombie makeup on her dad or something. This dude does not look like he's been at the bottom of a lake for 7 years. He's like a little bit muddy, like he just fell into the lake when he was drunk or something. So overall, I really enjoy watching the last act of this movie, but it really misses the mark on its premise. Like Jason versus a Carrie type, that could have been an awesome movie the whole way through if it was done right. But this movie struggled for a large portion of its runtime. Now, with all that being said, there are a few things that I really like about this movie. This is obviously the introduction of Kane Hodder as Jason. He just brings a whole new level of anger to the character. Like, I've never seen Jason look this pissed off. This is probably my favorite of the 4 movies he does, as far as Kane Hodder's version of Jason. So yeah, I love Kane Hodder in this movie. The second thing is just the look of Jason himself. Like I said, he's absolutely badass, with the chain wrapped around his neck, with his spine exposed, and also Jason unmasked. This is by far the coolest looking version of zombie Jason, both masked and unmasked. The third thing I enjoyed here is I actually did like Tina's character. A lot of people give her a lot of shit. I'm not exactly sure why. They say like she doesn't really have personality, but like, I don't know, are we watching the same movie? She has quite a few moments throughout this movie where she's like flipping out or she's losing her mind. To me, the character works. She definitely has a big personality, especially compared to some of these other final girls. So I don't know why people don't like Tina in this movie, but I really enjoyed her. And then the last positive I have here is that final act, minus that last scene. When we finally get the matchup that we've been waiting for with Tina and Jason, in my opinion, it delivers. Like this entire sequence with Tina fighting Jason, starting out on the dirt road, leading to both of the cabins, is so badass. I just wish more of the movie could have lived up to this scene. Now, as far as what I didn't like about this movie, it's a bit of a laundry list, so buckle in. The first thing has to be these side characters. Like I mentioned before, to me, there is not one memorable character in this movie other than Jason and Tina. I hated the side characters in this movie. The only thing I remember about these characters is being annoyed. Negative number 2, the kills. This movie has the shittiest kills. Now, you do get the one cool sleeping bag sequence, and I love the way like Jason throws Melissa's body, how it just kind of like flails over the TV set. Other than those 2 moments though, the kills in this movie are terrible. My third negative, gotta talk about it, you guys know, the pacing. This movie struggles for about 80% of the runtime. And this is literally a movie that upon rewatching, you're just watching to get to that final act. The first like 80-85% of this movie is pretty boring, so the pacing here was very poorly executed, especially coming off Jason Lives, what a bummer. Number 4, this movie just looks bad. Again, coming off part 6 that did everything so beautifully, you can tell the budget wasn't very good, or at least it wasn't invested properly in this entry. Like the movie just looks cheap. To me it almost looks like a made-for-TV movie. Negative number 5 is that damn ending. I hate this ending so much. This might be up there with worst endings in the franchise. But of course, we do have Jason Takes Manhattan coming up next. Oh boy. And finally, part 7 is where we kind of started on the downhill slope. This movie isn't as bad as a few of the movies following it, but this is where the quality to me starts to go downhill in a big way. So The New Blood is kind of the beginning of the end of this franchise. And the sad thing is we just crossed the halfway point. Looking forward to reviewing the rest of these. So that's going to do it for Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. While I don't hate this movie, it definitely doesn't belong anywhere near the top probably even half of my list here. But let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Maybe some of you disagree with me. Maybe there's some of you that really enjoyed the New Blood. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what I'm doing here, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. Helps a lot. Subscribe right down here for all of my future content. And if you're enjoying my Friday the 13th series review, be sure to check out a few of the other videos right over here. Until next time, we'll see you guys for, oh God, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.